Welcome, dear viewers, to episode 16 of IBFD's Tax Takes series. This video series is dedicated to discussing the tax implications of the COVID-19 pandemic. In today's episode, we will be talking about the implications the pandemic has on customs duties. Many tax professionals might not be aware that customs duties not only serve as a state revenue, but they also serve to protect local markets and also to mitigate public health risks. In today's episode, we will be going through all the measures countries have taken in relation to customs and the pandemic, also discussing a bit on what kind of economic and trade effects the pandemic had, and also going through the potential measures businesses can take in this regard. Joining me today for this episode is Leonardo Macedo, who is a tax judge in Brazil. He has extensive knowledge in customs, and he has been working together with both the World Customs Organization and the OECD for over a decade now in relation to customs. It is an honor to have you here now, Leonardo.
Thank you, Zsolt. It's my pleasure to represent the customs family here today.
Thank you very much. So maybe we can already jump into the thick of things. And well, what are your impressions? How did this pandemic affect global trade as such?
Well, Zsolt, as you are aware, the effect of COVID-19 has been tremendous on global trade. Figures from the WTO, from UNCTAD, from other international organizations show an overall decline between 13 and 32% in trade for this year, 2020. So a tremendous impact. Transport, data, both maritime flights and everything has been impacted. But the regions have been impacted differently. That's one important thing to note. So one of the most impacted has been the Americas region and the Middle East region. On the other hand, less impact on the Asia Pacific region. Like we say at the WTO, we divide the world in five these regions. So that's a way to see the world. And also goods have been impacted differently. That's also one important thing to note. So the energy market, for example, has been tremendous, has had a tremendous impact. So oil tankers, and you saw that super tankers waiting for storage, the prices went really low when there was no demand for certain types of goods. On the other hand, there are some IT equipment and, of course, protective gear for medicals, equipment supplies. This has increased. So it varies. It varies a lot from country to country, from region to region, from market to market. So you have to check on a case by case.
Indeed, that's a very important and an interesting thing that you're pointing out. Maybe also because this would suggest to me that also the measures that countries have to take, they have to be quite case by case. So, but still, maybe we can point out a couple of common topics and common measures that we can see in the recent couple of.
Yes, for sure. One thing that comes very strong is the importance of the HS codes, the coding system, the commodity coding that we use worldwide to identify goods. So this is a convention, and this all good needs a code, and that's very clear the importance of such codes during the pandemic. You have to identify what goods are essential, and this has been a challenge from the beginning. Of course, every country has its own priority, and with that list, with that priority, you are going to take the measures. you're going to lower the tariffs, you're going to facilitate the trade, but you see everything depends, and that shows like one thing more, that technology, it's ahead. So the codes are to be implemented into the systems. I mean, custom systems, trade systems, transport systems, logistics systems, supply chain systems. So the codes need to be filled in so that really the trade for these goods get facilitated. So this is one of the key measures, to have your HS list ready. Other measures are related to the WTO Trade Facilitation Agreement. That's a pillar now in terms of trade facilitation. So countries refer to that document in search for implementation of risk management, electronic payment, acceptance of digital copies, joint physical inspections of border agencies, mutual recognition, and that all facilitates trade. Other conventions I can refer that have measures to facilitate are the revised Kyoto Convention from the WCO, has a specific chapter, and more on disasters and pandemic and relief. I should mention that there is a model act from the Red Cross and Red Crescent societies in cooperation with the United Nations that is also reference document to face this kind of situations.
I see. So there are indeed, it seems, quite some measures to facilitate the global movement of goods. And if I understand correctly from your words, the main intended benefit is for the goods to actually move through customs as quickly as possible. Do I see that correctly?
Yes, Zsolt. Not only through customs, but through all border management agencies. So the goods have to speed up from point to point, from the beginning to the end of the supply chain. And they have to pass through different agencies, of course, the export country, the import country, transport, and all these agencies in between. And that's a big challenge, you know, because in many countries, the systems are not integrated. Customs maybe has a system that is more advanced, while the other agencies need to step up the game. And that's the big challenge, to harmonize the data, to have it in place so that we can speed up, we can hurry with the goods, you can release and you can get the goods to the person who is in need. That's the objective.
Mm-hmm. Well, if, of course, you're speeding up all these processes, I would assume that there will be some drawbacks. So I guess that these measures also pose a kind of challenge for countries, for authorities, and potentially also for businesses.
Indeed. You pointed very well. As always, customs and border agencies face a lot of issues with fraud, with trade that is no good for business. Sometimes even the attempt to help, as we say, if the country has not defined its priority list, what is essential, and then it gets donations, goods that arrive that are not needed, and these take the space of ports and warehouses and create problems of storage. We saw also one thing that we refer in economics as a tragedy of commons. Individuals act by themselves, and instead of a collective and benefit of the state, they end up by harming by creating problems for their own country, putting prices up, creating problems of supply and things like demand, and that's terrible. So I mentioned the tragedy of commons, I mentioned fraud, I mentioned we saw again one thing that everyone went to Asia because everything was in Asia, but this was the epicenter of the pandemic in the beginning. But the transport routes, the main hubs of transport, are few in the world. So you also cannot escape that. So when you decide to buy something, you always need to look at your transport route. Where's the hubs? Where's the big transportation? Where there is stable transport, and yeah, and Asia is there. Asia is the place.
Indeed, and well, it's interesting that you're mentioning fraud in connection to measures that are actually facilitating the movement of the goods. And usually when fraud and the whole topic comes up, the very trendy answer that is given is that we need more digitalization. We need to move more towards electronic systems. Do you see that this pandemic is actually further supporting the introduction of such electronic systems in the world of customs?
Certainly, Zsolt. There is no doubt that technology in general comes very strong as a response from the pandemic and from future crises. So technology gets a high priority. Before, yes, you had projects with technology, but now it's very clear that all projects have to be technological with a focus. If you don't use technology on your favor to expedite things, to change the border, so it's no more a physical border, but it's a digital border. You get all the data, you do all the clearance, you do all the risk management before the goods arrive to your country, even before the goods depart from the export country. So some countries are more advanced than others. They have this harmonized data, and the machines can communicate faster, and so the data can flow. So the border can be further away from the country of importation. You are absolutely right. Technology is key, and digitalization and everything that can help to speed up this data cross border that comes ahead of the physical goods. That helps a lot.
Mm-hmm. You also mentioned the question with trade routes and trade hubs, and this is, I think, an interesting question for all businesses and also viewers who are looking at this problem from a business perspective. That how can actually businesses react to the pandemic, and then what kind of long-term strategy changes might be required from their side?
Well, I've heard a lot of a trend for globalization diversification. I've heard that from the Nobel Prize recently in an event. She was speaking about the need for companies to diversify their supply chain. I believe that's necessary. That's, of course, I agree with that. But you have also to be conscious that, as I mentioned, trade routes are fixed. They cannot change too much. So when you talk about the Silk routes, these are trade routes that have been established years ago because of commercial, military, security, friendship. Many things are into consideration when you have one of such trade routes. So as much as companies want to diversify, they are not as free as we think. So the hubs, they stay there. I can change a little bit in Asia, but I have to stay on that route. I need to be sure that the ship is going to be passing every 7 days or every 5 days to collect my container. That's a practical thing. Otherwise, my costs are really high with the container waiting there at the port to be collected, and transshipment. Also, it's terrible. It takes days for a new if I need to stop my container. So I need direct routes. I need things to be fast in terms of transport. So when you listen about diversification, you have to be very careful. You have to understand that they must be on that route. They are flexible to diversify, but that's not much. Not in the short term.
Interesting. That's a very interesting point that you're raising, because it really points out that when global trade is concerned, it's not all about regulations and technical questions. Sometimes it's a much broader, overarching, sometimes even cultural question, right?
Right, Zsolt. That's it. That's the we build these relationships. It takes centuries for trust. It's all based on trust. And now you tell me you need to you need to diversify, find new partners, trade with different countries, find new routes. I say to you, Zsolt, yes, that's very beautiful in theory, but in practice, that's not the reality. So trust is the fundamental stone of international trade.
I think that's a very, very beautiful closing word as well, Leonardo. So, well, thank you very, very much for your insights and for joining us for this episode.
Thank you all your listeners, and good health to everyone. I hope to meet you in the future.
Indeed, and thank you very much from my side as well for the viewers, and the same from my side. Good health to everyone and stay safe.
Bye.